Time to get back into Jimmy Stein's world-famous Alabama football roster countdown and also talk about a guy who could be on the countdown in years to come.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama. You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson is me. Jimmy Stein is him. Sorry about the performance issues on the opening video. Maybe need to get some Blue Chews for my video at the very beginning. Anyway, I don't know anything about that. And, of course, I get a phone call just as soon as we start.
From the Locked On bosses. No more Blue Chews.
As somebody pointed out, all right, two things. First of all, somebody pointed out yesterday that our volume wasn't loud enough because they were trying to listen while they were on the treadmill. So I'm trying to speak up a little bit, guys. Number two, somebody said, Luke can mute himself accidentally, but can't mute his phone on purpose. And that is very, very clever and so true. Jimmy, let's go ahead and start over. We're going to start with the countdown again. We have come all the way to Kaden Proctor, who is a ginormous human being. If I can only imagine, what if Kaden Proctor were alive in like 1612? I don't know why I picked that date, but let's just pick that date. I mean, do you think like he'd be like a deity? I mean, look at this man. Look, I'm about to put him up. Look at that man. That is huge.
I tell you, it'd be like, I'm not super familiar. I guess I've seen the movie, but I don't remember a lot of it. There was like a comedy movie, The Princess Bride, and a character and it took place a long, long time ago, like in the 1600s or earlier. And there was a character in The Princess Bride played by Andre the Giant. And I guess Kaden, and of course that was a fictional story and a fictional, movie. Kaden Proctor, had he been alive back then, I'm sure it would have been really similar to that Andre the Giant character in The Princess Bride, I guess. I mean, he is just enormous, but the number one compliment I can give him, and since we're talking about him right now, he's number 33 on the countdown. I count down we rank the roster, like from the best kid, is number one, and the kid we're probably not going to see much of at all is number 88, and that's how we've been counting them down. We're down to 33. Just 33 guys left, and Kaden Proctor's 33. To me, the 33rd best player on this Alabama team, and he just showed up. That's shocking at Nick Saban's Alabama, but that's how good this kid is. And the number one compliment I can give him, Luke is right, he would have been a deity of sorts had he been around a few centuries ago. But for a guy as enormous as he is, and he's a Coke machine with feet. He is huge, but he's unlike a Coke machine. He is light on his feet. He bounces around on the field. He's got great. This is a left tackle. He's huge, and he's a left tackle. You wouldn't really want to play him anywhere else, though he could. If you played him at guard, he'd be great. He'd move people in the run game. He would be so good. If you played him at right tackle, maybe that's his best spot. Won't be shocked in the NFL if that's not his position, because the right tackle is sort of a combo. Hey, you got to be good in the run game, and you also have to be good in pass protection. Left tackle is where you want your best pass protector, and it's the most vital spot on the offensive line. And that's where you've got to play Kaden Proctor at Alabama or at any college. He's got to be left tackle, because that's who you want to entrust the blind side of your quarterback to. Kaden Proctor's got you, man. He will seal off the blind side, and that's why you got to play him there. But he's so good at everything that he could play any spot. But gosh, probably his ideal play him weight is going to be in the 330 range, which is just tremendous. Yet he's light on his feet. He also, despite playing high school football in Iowa, Luke, showed up this spring and won spots, leapfrogged veteran players, and now is a major contender to be the starting left tackle for Alabama this fall. I'm predicting that he will. Now, I'm not sure about it. And the reason I'm not sure has nothing to do with Proctor. It's mostly a compliment to Elijah Pritchett, who's 1 year older, has 1 year more experience in the system. I'm not positive he's ever going to beat out Elijah Pritchett because Pritchett's so good. But my prediction, and just, hey, let's be a prediction show. Nick Saban doesn't listen, so we can predict all we want. My prediction is Elijah Pritchett begins the year at left tackle, and at some point Proctor takes over. Also, won't be too shocked if there's some sort of a rotation at tackle between Proctor, Pritchett, and J.C. Latham. And as much as right now you should be screaming at the screen or at your podcast going, Jimmy, Nick Saban doesn't rotate players in the offensive line. You should know that if you know Alabama football. You're mostly correct. He had never rotated on the offensive line until last season. Last season he did. He played 3 guards the whole season. There was a rotation, well, after the first couple games. After the first couple games, there was a rotation with Javion Cohen, Emil Ekiyor, and Tyler Booker rotating at guard. So Saban did it before. Obviously, Wolford talked him into it, and it worked. I thought Alabama's guard play was pretty good. It worked. I wouldn't be shocked to see a rotation at tackle with Pritchett, Proctor, and J.C. Latham. But that's not my official prediction. My official prediction is starts out the year Pritchett on the left side, Latham on the right side. Somewhere in late September, Proctor takes over at left tackle, and Pritchett just becomes one of the best 6th offensive linemen in the SEC.
A couple of things. First of all, if Kaden Proctor gets any bigger, he's going to have a backup camera on the inside of his face mask. So he doesn't hit anything on the way back. I like that joke because I now have a backup camera in my car and like I use it for everything. So that was secondly, okay, I'm not trying to spoil your countdown, but I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about other freshmen who haven't been talked about yet. Caleb Downs. I mean, as far as, and don't spoil it. I mean, you might have him in the top 10. I mean, you might. Don't say that you do or don't. And then we haven't talked about Justice Haynes, I don't believe. Those are only 2 freshmen outside of Kaden Proctor that I can think of. Is there somebody else I'm missing?
No, you got it. You nailed it. Those are only 2 freshmen ahead of Kaden Proctor on this list. And we just went over James Smith last time, who's right behind him. I think James Smith will play with the 1s. I think Kaden Proctor will become a 1 during the season. And that's why I have him where he's at, but he's also at 33 on the countdown and not top 22 because I'm not 100% convinced he'll beat out Elijah Pritchett. Again, that's a nod to Pritchett. It is not has nothing to do with how I feel about Kaden Proctor, who I think is basically going to track Evan Neal. And to me, he's not Evan Neal. He's a different guy. I think he's going to go even higher than Neal, frankly, but Evan Neal was an immediate starter, played a couple positions, ended up at tackle, and then I think was the 6th pick in the NFL draft, 6th, 7th, somewhere around that to the Giants. I think Proctor's Evan Neal. I think he's going to show up and be good enough right away, and then 3 years later, he's going to win a bunch of awards and then be a top 10 pick.
All right, Jimmy, let me tell everybody about FanDuel now. You know we love FanDuel. We love FanDuel as much as we love bird dogs. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball at FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. So that's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets if you win or you lose. That's pretty easy. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who's going to hit the first home run, who's going to get the first strikeout, and will the Braves ever lose? I know they lost Sunday, but Lord help us all. I don't think anybody can beat them. I don't think the 85 Bears can beat them. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. And if you've ever done any online betting, you know how big a deal that is. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon and get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel official partner of Major League Baseball. Jimmy, tomorrow we are expecting some good news from one Casey Poe, an offensive lineman in Texas. We will certainly talk about that on the show. And we'll continue on with your countdown, but the Casey Poe will probably dominate. Casey Poe commitment, we expect. We can't guarantee it. We expect it. Will dominate the show tomorrow, I'm sure, because a lot of people have been wondering about Alabama's offensive line. commitments and recruitments, because you look at Georgia, and Georgia's offensive line class is looking, if nothing else, humongous. And it feels like they have a type when it comes to offensive line, and they want them to be really, really big, thick, with 2 C's, maybe 3 C's. And anywho, so we'll talk about that tomorrow. But now we're going to move on to your next guy. And when you told me the guys that are coming for your list, as I'm getting another phone call, which is just good. We're just going to have to power through that because I have no way of turning that ringer off. But I was a little surprised when you gave me your list for today of Kaden Proctor, Danny Lewis, and I'll save the last one, that Danny Lewis was ahead of Kaden Proctor.
Well, this is the reason. And I'm not saying, again, this is about the 2023 football team. I didn't rank the roster as in, hey, 5 years from now, when we look at this team, who was the best player? It's not 5 years from now. It's this fall. And the reason I have Danny Lewis just one spot. Now, there's 88 spots in this countdown, so it's not a big deal to have somebody one spot ahead of someone else. But the reason that I have Danny Lewis one spot ahead of Proctor, like I said during the Proctor breakdown, I'm not convinced Proctor's going to beat out Elijah Pritchett. I'm pretty sure. I'm betting that he does, but I'm not convinced. Pritchett's a really good player. He was the first team left tackle for 15 practices in the spring and never replaced. Struggled a little bit on A-Day, but let's remember he's playing against better players, playing ones against ones than Proctor was, who was playing with the twos against twos. So I'm not convinced, but I'm pretty sure. Now, Danny Lewis, I am 100% convinced that Danny Lewis will play considerable snaps with the first team offense. Now, Alabama sort of rotates at tight end, so it's a bit of an advantage for Danny Lewis when we're talking about who's going to play with the first team, right? Because we're going to play 3 or 4 tight ends quite a bit with the first team. I think Danny Lewis will end up second in total snaps with the tight end group. I think you're going to see him first quarter, first game. I think he's going to play around 40 snaps every Saturday. I think he's going to catch a few balls. He had a remarkable spring. I would say he's one of the bigger stories of the spring because going into the spring, I don't think any of us were penciling in Danny Lewis to be the first team tight end with the ones on A-Day. And there he was. He was a starter with the first team on A-Day as a redshirt freshman. He had a louder spring, I think, than any other tight end, including C.J. Dupree, including Amari Niblack. So Danny Lewis is certain to be with the ones. That's why I have him one spot ahead of Proctor. Now, if you're asking me, okay, Jimmy, when you redo this list 5 years from now, yeah, Proctor may be number one. Danny Lewis is going to be, somewhere in the teens probably, or in the early 20s, and not here at 32. So that's true. I think Proctor probably is the more gifted kid. But this is about the 2023 roster. Danny Lewis is a year older. He has won himself a spot with the first team. I think that's in the bag. So that's why he ranks here in terms of why he's so good. He's a real good combination of prototypical size. He's exactly as big as you want a tight end to be in the 6'5", 250 range. I mean, absolutely looking the part as a blocker. He is a block first guy. But as a receiver, what balls out really is his hands. He has outstanding soft hands. This isn't a guy that's going to get a lot of separation. He's not a guy that's going to outrun the defense. That's not him. But what he will do is he will be a really good blocker. And when you throw him the football, if you get it near him, he's going to catch it. This isn't a guy that's going to drop a lot of balls. Really soft hands. Definitely a tight end. I think he's got a pro future. Is he Brock Bowers? Is he first round guy? No. But he's a good player. We had to beat LSU in Louisiana to get him, so he was a pretty high value recruit. But we're pretty high on him, BOL, and obviously very high on Proctor too. Tim Watts the other day on BOL called Kaden Proctor maybe the greatest recruiting win of the whole Nick Saban era. I mean that, and boy, that's a lot to say. But Tim's been around a long time, and he's often right. And that's what he said about Kaden Proctor, in terms of our opinion about that kid over there, the greatest win of the Nick Saban, recruiting era. That's saying a lot. But Danny Lewis sort of won a spot in the spring. Proctor hadn't won his spot yet. So let's give Daniel Lewis just one spot ahead of him right now.
Interesting take by Tim there, because here's my thing. I mean, you would have to talk about Tua, who everybody assumed was going to USC, or Bryce, who was actually committed to USC, or Najee, all those guys out in California. But, the one thing that I would agree on him about Proctor, I think all the LA guys would probably be more apt to leave, but just because they're a little more worldly. I mean, just being in LA, they have a greater sense of the universe. Not saying Kaden Proctor is, just some doesn't know anything. But when you're in Iowa, you're an Iowa dude. It's kind of hard to pull you out.
When you grew up in LA, you could be a fan of anyone, right? I mean, you could be a fan of the New York teams. I mean, I don't think it'd be surprising to go to LA and find Los Angeles kids who grew up fans of some SEC. Who knows? But in Iowa, if you're born in the rural Iowa, you're a fan of Iowa or maybe Iowa State, but probably Iowa. And Iowa has such a great history with offensive linemen. I remember saying when I'd given up on Proctor, because there was a time I'd given up, like, well, this isn't going to happen. There was a time when I remember writing this on BOL, Luke. I said, if Kaden Proctor played any other position besides offensive line, this would be over. He would have chosen Alabama. But he happens to play the one position, maybe two, because they have a good tight end history there too. But offensive line and tight end, those are the only positions that they could hold Alabama off, because they have a head coach who's an offensive line guy. Kirk Ferentz was an offensive line coach in the NFL, actually on the Saban staff at the Cleveland Browns in '94. So Kaden Proctor, I think the flip from Iowa to Alabama was just a shock to me, and not too much shocks me anymore. We've kind of seen a lot by now.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about countdown player number 3. And we're back. Jimmy, the next guy on the countdown, I'm going to freak everybody out, putting a Georgia guy out there, is Trez Marshall. He transfers over from Georgia to the University of Alabama. Looks the part. I mean, certainly looks the part. I mean, looks like Tarzan. The rest of that saying is plays like Jane. I don't know that he plays like Jane because, frankly, he's been hurt a lot. So we don't know. But that's another thing that's interesting to me about where you have him on this countdown, because, frankly, if you ask me, okay, bank on somebody contributing more this year, Kaden Proctor or Trez Marshall, I'm going to bank on Proctor, because I just don't know that I trust Marshall to stay healthy. But at the same time, if you guarantee me Trez Marshall is going to be healthy, I would clearly put Marshall above Kaden Proctor.
Yeah.
So are you? The question is, are you guaranteeing me he's going to stay healthy?
Yeah, that's exactly what the purpose of today's show is. I'm showing my Harry Potter wand and doing some health spell. But now I'm going to have Trez higher than most people. I'll admit this is one that I am ripe for criticism here, because I think others believe, look, there's 2 inside linebacker spots. One's going to Deontay Lawson. Notice we haven't got to Lawson yet. It's going to be a while on the countdown before we get to him, by the way. But there's Jahad Campbell and there's Justin Jefferson. We just covered them very recently. I've got Marshall ahead of Jahad Campbell and Justin Jefferson. Not everyone else will. I acknowledge that and may be wrong about this. Campbell or Jefferson may win the spot. I think Marshall's going to win it. I am, of course, assuming good health. If he gets hurt, he's obviously not going to win it. And he's been hurt 2 different seasons of his, he's basically spent 3 or 4 years in college. He's spent I think he's been here 4 years, but 1 didn't count because of COVID. He was healthy his first year at Georgia and played right off the bus. He was one of their most valuable special teams players as a true freshman. And then this past season, he played a lot. He didn't get hurt this past season, played quite a bit. Probably had his best game in the national championship game against TCU. But his middle 2 seasons, 2020 and 2021, he was hurt, virtually lost both seasons to injury. So he has been hurt a lot. I like Trez a ton. I compare him to Jalen Moody not so much as a player. I think their skill sets are different. I compare him to Moody because the stories are similar. Moody didn't play a huge role at Alabama until his last year, because it wasn't until his last year that the opportunity was there for him. But he kind of played like a veteran and won a starting spot because even though he hadn't played a ton, he had been around a while. We also got Jalen Moody out of the portal. People don't remember that, but Moody went into the portal. We recruited him out of the portal after Drew Sanders left and after Christian Harris went pro. And we had to go back to Moody in the portal and say, look, your opportunity for a starting spot is big. We need you, man. And here's your chance to start at Alabama. It's a better opportunity for you than you'll have it at Texas, where Moody was likely headed. Marshall, kind of the same deal. I mean, his opportunity at Alabama is pretty good. It might not be, it's a better opportunity than what he had at Georgia. So Trez, though, is a different player. Moody's a thumper. Marshall's an athlete. Okay. I mean, Moody's more old school. Marshall's more new school. Wiry, good in pass coverage, a guy who can move around, a chess piece, smart, great on special teams. I just think with his veteran, he's a 4-year guy now in the SEC in a defense similar to Alabama's. I just really like the veteran nature of an inside linebacker tandem of Trez Marshall and Deontay Lawson. I have Marshall as a starting every down inside linebacker. That's why I have him 2 spots ahead of Proctor, 1 spot ahead of Danny Lewis. But I admit, unlike the last 2, this is more of a projection that I might be alone on. I understand if others are like, no, I think Campbell's going to win that spot, or I think Justin Jefferson's going to win the spot. I get it, and I'm not really disagreeing. I'm just saying Trez Marshall's my best guess today.
And certainly I can buy that. I can certainly buy it. Again, I'm putting this picture up for those watching YouTube, and he looks like a dude. Looks like a Georgia dude, and Georgia dudes look like Alabama dudes, and vice versa. You want Alabama and Georgia dudes, but you need them healthy. And, the one thing I do like about him, it feels like to me that we've got a lot of guys in that position who are strong but wiry. Like, he looks like more of a bulky kind of guy, and I think we need that.
Yeah, he's a wiry, but he's also well over 220. He's not a 210 guy. But, I was just thinking, because you brought it up a few times about Trez being hurt. Deontay Lawson's been hurt a lot too. Deontay's been at Alabama for 2 seasons and has lost a chunk of the season both times to injury, and then missed the entirety of the spring with injury. And Trez Marshall's had this injury history. As much as I was just telling you, Luke, that, hey, I think Trez is going to beat out Justin Jefferson and Jahad Campbell and be the starter next to Lawson. If Lawson and Marshall get hurt again, we shouldn't be stunned. And you know who the starting inside linebackers would be then? Campbell and Jefferson. And we'd be fine. Yeah. They'd be fine. They would lack experience. That's gonna scare you a little bit. But the overall athleticism of Jahad Campbell and Justin Jefferson starting inside would be fantastic. Those two would be disruptive playmakers. They would just kind of be in the wrong spot at times. You just have to understand that lack of experience means here comes the bust. And when linebackers bust, that's a 15, 20-yard play. Hopefully a defensive back will clean it up.
All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with Casey Poe news, with more countdown news, and other Jimmy Stein guarantees. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.